Sae'Von Springer is the owner and founder of Native Assets. Any views expressed by Sae'Von or his guest are their own thoughts and opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. Any guest appearance by representatives of Web3, NFT, crypto, or any other kind of organization does not constitute an endorsement by Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be mistaken as financial advice. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult a qualified professional when considering any investments of any kind. The creator economy has absolutely boomed over the past decade. Companies like Roblox and Fortnite publisher Epic Games have each made over $1 billion alone from the digital collectibles and wearables sold within their platforms. This trend is just beginning. Today's guest understands this better than most and is helping create tools to usher in this creator economy by way of NFTs and Web3. Director of Product for REMX, the go-to platform for designing, selling, collecting 3D digital wearables for the metaverse, Mike Montgomery, welcome to the show. How are you?
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just go ahead and jump into this, man. We were on a call and the way you phrased it, I thought this was genius because immediately it clicked for me, was REMX being almost the Canva for 3D assets. Now, Can you pull at that onion a little bit and kind of set it up so people can better understand what it is you all do at REMX?
Sure. So, high level, what we do at REMX is we really sort of see ourselves as sitting at the intersection of design, fashion, and technology. So, as you mentioned, we are the go-to platform for designing, selling, and collecting 3D digital wearables for the metaverse. Our goal is to really make it easy for anyone to enter this space with no prior 3D or code experience. So we really want to onboard people in a very simplistic way, provide very clear, simple tools and ways to just jump in and start designing. So that's really what REMX is all about. We want to onboard as many people as possible into this space. That's our goal, make it very simple through the use of very clear, simple tools.
Excellent. Now, when you all were building this out, can you walk me through almost a little bit of a timeline? And what I mean is in reference to something like the Sandbox or Decentraland or even what Artifact is doing, because ultimately, when I think about these sort of tools, one, I think about what has already existed as kind of the existing or pre-existing barrier to entry to doing 3D design. I interviewed another designer, his name is Morad NEA, and just talking about Blender and just how complicated or complex doing something is once you remove it from being 2D to being, three-dimensional and all the layers that go into that. So first, before we get into the second part, how did you all approach simplifying that process? And then we'll start to talk about kind of the interoperability.
Absolutely. So awesome question. So we observed the same things coming to this space. I have a creative background, a design background. 3D has always been a barrier for me. It's something I've been very interested in, but really going from 2D to 3D is a challenge. There's a huge barrier there, huge technical challenge. So we saw this as an opportunity to create tools to solve our own problems. So, really we're new to the Web3 space. Trying to figure out how to build for this space is challenging for many people. There's obviously a lot of great projects coming out, like you mentioned, CloneX and what they're doing. However, the challenge being really knowledge of 3D and 3D software is required, barrier for many people. So that's really where the idea for REMX came from, is how can we make it very simple for anybody to engage in this space, design and build for the metaverse, specifically when it comes to 3D, without knowledge of Blender and Unity and some of these other 3D softwares.
And what was and I know we're kind of getting a little technical, on some Tim Ferriss vibes, but what was really the process of saying, hey, we're going to create a standard when we come onto this platform, you can design an asset? Because what I noticed in the demo that I saw is that this is all in the browser, right? Like you don't have to download a separate application or some heavy, software that takes up several gigabytes on your machine, and then hopefully you have the RAM. So part of the thing that I find intriguing just about even the whole idea of the metaverse in general is this kind of step change in what the technology can do. Because, when I was younger, I was super into games and, it's like you have the PlayStation, then when the 2 comes out and you're reading all this data on how many more petaflops or how much it can process to pixel counts and all of these things, so that ultimately the game can become higher fidelity and more nuance within it. And so to be able to take something that is designing and rendering these 3D assets at a very high quality level, but doing so in the browser, is that something proprietary that y'all built in-house, or was this something where you're leveraging technologies that just haven't really, I guess, found their time in the spotlight just of yet?
So great question. So we are developing this in-house, I guess, to answer that question. However, our approach here really was accessibility. So, when we look at 3D softwares, yes, you're required to download a software. It's something else you're running which is taking up that space in the GPU, right? So for us, it was accessibility. How can anybody access this from anywhere? So we felt that web-based was the place to start. So whether you're on a desktop, you're on your mobile device, we felt that wherever you are, you should be able to access our tools, leverage our tools, build, develop, and deploy. So that's really, our mindset in developing our own tool set is how can we just make, this accessible to anyone wherever they are. That was very important to us. So we, again, didn't want to build a standalone application that had to be developed. We felt it was important to be web-based, and then naturally being able to deploy this to many different places. Thinking about interoperability for the future, that's really where we sort of had a ground-up approach mindset around that.
So when considering interoperability, I think about those platforms we touched on briefly earlier, Decentraland, Sandbox. Those, from an aesthetic standpoint, those are very rooted in I would just call it the Minecraft aesthetic, right? I don't know the technical name for it, but it's kind of low resolution, even though, obviously you can play the game at high 4K, whatever it is, but the assets themselves they're not skeuomorphic, they're almost the opposite. They're in that vogue of Minecraft. But then you see other platforms like what Artifact is doing, and they definitely have a higher resolution or smoothness to the way it's rendered, but it's still in a very stylized fashion. And then there are other platforms coming about, something like the technology that we saw with the Other Side demo that's running on Improbable's tech stack. And then I think about other things like Wilder World that are going for the hyper-realism sort of slant. So one, what was the decision on how to build a tool that could be versatile for those things, or how versatile is it? And then how did you all go about figuring out a way so that when people make these assets, they can plug in? And I know there's a list, and obviously it's difficult to support every platform, but deciding that those were the ones you wanted to make sure there was interoperability with. From my understanding, that is Decentraland, Sandbox, and Artifact. So if you can walk us through that.
Definitely. So I think, just to be clear, we're still sort of figuring this all out. So I want to be fully transparent there. But for us, it was, looking at what Decentraland and Sandbox are doing. So obviously, creating amazing ecosystems around those. So great things happening. Aesthetically, they've sort of chosen their direction. Then looking at what, you mentioned what Artifact is doing on the other side. So obviously more kind of hyper realistic. So really it's, our view on the metaverse is that, the idea of interoperability is you should be able to be whoever you want to be in the metaverse when it comes to your digital identity, and whatever aesthetic appeals to you, that should be your choice. So I think the challenge with some of these platforms is that you're sort of sandboxed into a very specific aesthetic. And for us, we don't want to set any limitations around that. We want to enable and really any aesthetic that anybody wants to sort of focus on. With some of our initial prototyping, we went a little more hyper realistic as that's more the aesthetic that we value in sort of terms of our early prototyping. However, the future of our platform is really going to enable anyone to design for whatever aesthetic they like. Really, that's sort of our goals here, is to not limit anyone. Where other platforms are limited to a very specific aesthetic, we don't want to limit people to any aesthetic. It really should be their choice.
Okay, I think that makes a lot of sense. And to me, when I saw the platform, I thought that was such a huge value proposition to it, because traditionally, even if I'm thinking about what goes into producing a podcast or a YouTube essay, right? You can record it and go through it, but then you ultimately wind up at a stage where you have to repurpose and, all right, well, TikTok wants it like this and this platform wants it like that. And if you can save, and I don't know if this is a feature, and I imagine there'll be some lift on this, but a way in which you can design an asset and then hit a switch and it converts it to make it so that, all right, this is what it would look like in this environment. Now, the same asset that I designed, if I plug it over here, it automatically converts the things that need to be converted so that it works on that platform. And that's such a time saver for people to be able to do that, as opposed to having to do this, I got to do it for this one, do it for that one, and do it for that one. And that's an incredible value proposition.
Absolutely. And that's really part of our goal here is how can we be in many different places at once with the press of one button. That's really sort of part of our value add for what we're developing. Obviously, you need to start somewhere, start with very specific aesthetic. But the goal is really how can we enable creators to design and then by hitting one button, produce content for many different platforms at the same time. That is really our goal. And again, we're working through this right now to see what's possible. There's obviously many technical challenges that exist here, but these are fun problems that we really want to solve.
Well, with that, to the extent that you can get into it, what have you all found as being some of those technical hurdles from just one, how it imports into this environment, but two, some of these are running on Ethereum. Some eventually might migrate to a different chain. So when you really start to think about that kind of on-chain component of it, where have y'all found some of those difficulties just based on things maybe not being standardized across platforms and knowing that some folks are working towards that? How has that been in terms of kind of solving that problem?
Yeah, definitely some major problems we're trying to tackle here. Really, our goal is to be chain agnostic. So the idea is that we can be able to support many different types of ecosystems. So that means we need to be chain agnostic. And then when it comes to the assets themselves, it's really understanding the specs of each platform individually. And that's part of the challenge right now when it comes to true interoperability is can you have one set standard across all ecosystems and platforms, which doesn't exist today. We hope it will in the future, but there's a lot of work with many parties involved to get there. So we feel the sort of bridge today anyway is to understand the specs of each platform that we're capable of supporting ahead of time, so that when we produce those assets, they're sort of built in a way ahead of time that we already understand the specs of each of those platforms. So that's really our approach is to spend time understanding the specifications of each unique platform and then design our system in a way that though we can sort of pre-populate or pre-render those assets to be compatible with each of these platforms with the press of one button. So that's obviously a huge initiative. We don't have it all figured out today, but we're working towards developing tools to get there.
For sure. Have you all, because you mentioned, and I've seen in the past couple of weeks, there have been different kind of working groups that have come together and like, let's form these standards. What are you hearing as I imagine you all are joining those conversations? What are the things, REMX is working on something, you have company over here working on something. Are there certain components that everybody is like, hey, can we just agree on this particular thing? Or can we agree on this? Are there any components in that stack that's involved in building out a world that most people are like, hey, a lot of this other stuff can be different, but if we just make this a standardized thing, all of our lives would be easier. Is there anything that has emerged like that already?
I don't really think there's any answers yet. I mean, there's many conversations happening. I mean, obviously many opinions on these things, which is part of the challenge. So I think it's still a little early to really answer that question. Yeah. But I hope that conversations can evolve and many people can kind of agree on standards. But really, when it comes down to standards, we're looking at technical specifications, 3D specifications, and specific to chains. So agreement on all of these sort of areas need to happen for this to be effective. I don't think anything has been solved yet, though. So I think it's still pretty early days in these conversations, and it's we don't have any answers yet.
Definitely. Now, when designing the kind of user experience and the user journey for this platform, when y'all made it, were y'all cognizant of like, hey, we're going to target the people who we fully expect to take these assets and as soon as possible take this over to some sort of metaverse environment? Or were you saying, hey, we just want this to be a tool to design the assets, provide the files for those assets, and we're not going to touch MetaMask, or we're not going to provide any sort of way to go from here and flow directly into that environment because it starts to bring in other complications that, are maybe outside the purview where REMX wants to do?
Absolutely. So you nailed it. So really, we're sort of starting from the apparel standpoint. There are a lot of technical challenges on the other side of that we haven't solved yet. So we're still working through that. So for us, it was really more about building tools, accessible tools for anybody to get in and start experimenting. So experimenting with 3D design, experimenting with generative design, make it very, very easy for anyone in what we call a design-friendly interface. So those are our number one goals right now in terms of our roadmap this year, is to how can we officially launch this platform, get as many creators as possible using the platform, developing 3D content, 3D wearable content. And then we're actively working through what is the sort of metaverse strategy around this, where we can be in as many platforms as possible. Those are sort of secondary goals for us right now that we're looking to tackle next year or a little further down the road in terms of our product roadmap. But right now, it's really about getting this tool in the hands of people and see what they can create with it. That's very exciting for us. Obviously, we're focused on digital wearables, but that's really where we want to start. And then we feel we can learn from the community. So we don't want to make a bunch of assumptions right now. We want to get this in the hands of creators, learn from creators, get as much feedback as possible in terms of features that would be required in the tool. So that's really where we started right now. And then the technical aspect, we're sort of pushing a little further down the line in terms of our product roadmap.
Okay, so for right now, if somebody were to jump on REMX and design an asset, they can remove that asset or export the asset rather, and then they can go publish it on some other creator marketplace or something like that if they felt like it. It does not have to do with NFTs or blockchain or anything if they don't want it to. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So we built it in a way that the creator could export that asset. So we allow anybody to export a GLB file with baked in texture. So that's really a universal 3D file which is compatible across all 3D platforms or tools. So that's something that was important to us, is to provide a way for people to build these and then walk away with something once it's been remixed, and then they can choose what they want to do with that asset. So that's sort of the first stage of interoperability for us, is to kind of start there. That was really our main goals right now, and sort of the main starting point. And if the user chooses to mint that as an NFT, they can do that on our platform. So we make it very easy for anybody to just get access to our own smart contracts if they have no experience with smart contracts, deploy it on our marketplace, and then sell those assets on our marketplace as NFTs. That we wanted to make that an option for creators as well, if that's what they wanted to do.
Okay, so two things, and we'll jump with the marketplace first, and then we'll talk about why the platform is called REMX. I think it's pretty dope. So when thinking about that marketplace, how did you all approach that when knowing, for instance, or looking at the landscape? I think about OpenSea, but I don't think about wearables necessarily. I think about collections and projects. And, there's innumerable marketplaces at this point, but what was you all's approach, and what was the main goal you wanted to get out of this marketplace?
So we, obviously there are other marketplaces that exist out there, and as you said, they're mainly focused on projects or collections, not necessarily focused on wearables. So we felt that we could carve out our own niche specific to wearables and really provide a destination for collectors and creators that are specifically looking for digital wearables. We really wanted to carve that niche out for ourselves, and in doing our own research, realized that nothing really existed for this. There are some small some projects on these other marketplaces focused on digital wearables, but nothing exclusive to digital wearables. So we really felt that we needed to build our own marketplace to support this and be a destination for anybody who's specifically looking for 3D digital wearables or looking to create 3D digital wearables on either side.
And so I imagine, based on your prior answer, similarly, the marketplace is not designed to alienate anybody based on whether they want to go the Web3 route or if they just want the asset. So how do you all break that down? If somebody just comes in and let's say, they're not super into crypto or NFTs, but they want to buy these assets, is it the same price to buy the asset, even in a non-NFT version, or when they buy it, do they get the NFT version as well? And can you walk us through that?
Sure. So as of now, we only support NFTs on the marketplace. That's where we're starting. However, in the future, we're looking to support different types of purchase on the platform. And the one thing I didn't mention is we are really looking to build an ecosystem around this where we can actually allow 3D artists to come and monetize their own content. So what I mean by this is within the tool, we start with or want to provide something we call 3D blanks. So these are essentially a blank canvas that can be a sneaker, a hat, a hoodie, whatever you want it to be. So if you have no prior 3D experience, you can just jump in and start creating with a 3D asset. What we're looking at building as well is the ability for anybody that does have 3D experience to upload their own content, as well as allow 3D artists to monetize their content. So they will be able to seed the platform with their own content as premium content that can be purchased as sort of a one-of-a-kind asset that a creator can claim and use that to launch their collection. So as of now, we're really focusing on the idea of NFTs as being sort of the output for the marketplace. And why we like this is the idea of ownership. And where we see ourselves really playing in the Web3 space is the idea of, even if you're just looking to purchase that asset to have and own the 3D asset to do what you want with it, still the idea of true sort of ownership around that asset, we believe is important to collectors and buyers. So as of now, we're not really looking at producing content that is not an NFT in the marketplace. However, we want to work with the community, learn what they really want, what they're looking for, and that may be something we'll entertain in the future.
Okay. Now with that, I am sure you have seen this conversation somewhere that you take in info. IP rights, copyrights, CC0. All right. So I'm gonna have to hit you with it. How are you all when somebody goes and let's say they either create an asset, right, or they purchase an asset, how has REMX approached handling those rights for individuals to the extent of, all right, when you buy from our platform, are they now the sole exclusive holder of that copyright license? Is it something that goes in CCO? Just how have you all approached that? And I understand you're not a lawyer. I'll go ahead and disclaim that for you, nor am I, but to the best of your understanding, how have you all tried to handle the ownership component of this?
Yeah, a great question. I was expecting this one. I knew nice. At some point.
Yeah, so I was hoping you didn't feel okie doke.
No, it's okay. So this was an important discussion we had early on when developing the platform. Really, where we landed on this is we, by default, we assign ownership rights, full ownership rights to the collector. So that's where we wanted to start with this. We believe this is what Web3 is all about. However, we do allow the creator, when developing their collection, to make this decision on their own, and they can decide what type of ownership rights they would like. So we want to keep this flexible. Again, we believe that full ownership is the way to go. Again, I'm not a lawyer either, so I don't want to speak to the legal implications of this. And this could involve, this is a rabbit hole we could go down for sure. But at a high level, we believe in ownership. You purchase an NFT, you get exclusive rights to do whatever you want with that. So we built that into sort of default to the platform for for creators. But as I said, if the creator, does want to specifically carve out ownership rights around their collection, they can do that within the platform. So we keep it fully flexible for creators.
I admire that you all have this conversation at the onset. Two, I really appreciate that you make it a choice. Because I'm literally working on a piece right now, I'll probably be out in the next few days really about this subject and spend a lot of time. And I'm actually talking to the team at Remaster later this week about this directly. But I think it's easy for things to get really polarized. And so I think by default, some people are going to just, IP rights, ownership, capitalism, hoorah. And then there are going to be people on the complete other side of the spectrum that's like, no, open source and CC0 and everything. And I firmly believe, especially after spending so much time on this, there are pros and cons to both options. And It really, to me, Web3 is ultimately about having a choice, not even about everything being decentralized, everything being owned by the user, but do we at least have the choice to do something differently than how it may have been done traditionally? And so giving people the ability to do that, I think that's phenomenal. I don't know if that's standard or not across other platforms, but I know for sure when I make some on OpenSea, they don't give me an option.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, it was very important to us to just really, we see ourselves as a tool. We don't want to make this decision for people. We don't want to control sort of the output of their collection, what their collection will be. We're a tool. And with that, we should allow people to design and launch their collection in any way that they like and make these decisions around their collection. So it should really be up to the creator, should not be up to us. That's how we view it. Well, I think I lost your audio. I can't hear you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I was muted. Can you explain to the folks why it's actually called REMX?
Definitely. So as we mentioned, the remix button is core to the platform, and we in building this tool, this platform, we wanted to do something very different. And with this, it was important to us to involve the collector in the creation process. And I promise I'm going to answer your question. It might be a long-winded answer, but so with this, we wanted to provide a way, as I mentioned, for the collector to be involved in the creation process. However, this needs to be controlled in some way. So we looked at a mechanism in which we can do this, and we felt the idea of being able to give some form of control to the buyer meant that they needed to engage in some way that didn't allow them to upload or introduce their own content. So what we really landed on is the idea of the creator curating the collection. So what I mean by that is they can make decisions around what the input options are. So colors, textures, rarity textures, these sort of things. But they don't actually influence the final output. And the final output is only determined by the collector. So what I mean by this is the collector actually hits the remix button and sees a completely unique design every single time, which is a randomized combination of all inputs, meaning colors and textures and rarity textures. So the creator does not know what the final output will be, but they have curated this already, so they control what those textures and colors will be. So to us, what remix really means is the idea of remixable content. So the collector can hit that button, see something completely unique, completely different every single time, and we can actually officially verify that no two collectors will get the same version of this. So we can verify this with our platform. So the remix button to us really represents randomization, co-creation, and influence over the final design, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a ton of sense. And when I saw you demo this, it was really like it was such a cool thing to see because, I'm sure most of our listeners understand this, but for those who may not, most of these collections that you see on OpenSea, be it an artifact, be it Bored Ape Yacht Club, which, really popularized this, they are a bunch of layers stacked on each other. The same way that when you make a song, there are stems to it. And when you make something in Photoshop, you have layers. These collections are ultimately layers, and the artist basically creates like let's call it a standard outline of, okay, this is going to be an ape, or this is going to be a shirt, or this is going to be a shoe. And then based on the different components that are in that, be it, hair, shirt, whatever it is, these are ultimately created individually. And then all of these assets are put onto a contract. And then the contract basically calls on these inputs and says, hey, when someone mints this, spit out some variation of these different layers. But oftentimes when they go through these collections, before they really put out the final contract, they go through some kind of process where they say, all right, let me look at the possible combinations, because some of them may not be to our liking. They may not be artistically there. And then they remove it from the collection. And so that way they curate it. But doing that, it's a much more involved process. If you're doing that all manually, you don't have the setup to do it. So one, a tool like this democratizes that process for somebody who does not know what these scripts are, how to actually set it up in a way where the output is what you want it to be. And then for the collector side, you get to kind of, instead of where you just, get on a list and then you mint the NFT and then you're sitting there waiting for reveal. Like, man, I hope this isn't shit, because let's be real. Sometimes this collection is hype and the art might be dope, but there's, and I see this a lot on crypto Twitter where somebody's like, yo, how are these pieces in the same collection? Like this one does not at all, give me the vibes that this does. And you can clearly look at something like that's rare, that's common, versus in this situation, you really give the collector that ability to say, to really jump at the one that calls to them, but do it in such a dope way where it's still going to be unique. And I didn't really even realize that. I thought to myself, maybe, if there's 100 combinations of this, 200 combinations, that in some way all these people see the same thing, but to be able to throw in a component where every time somebody's going to be able to get something that is unique to them. Obviously, this is why I wanted you on, Mike. I know I'm hyping y'all up. Just so y'all know, this is not sponsored. I was just like, yo, I know that tools exist, but this is dope. And just like I came across Canva, when I was in college, I was like, yo, this is dope. And then it went on to really blow up as more people were like, yep, I don't need to learn Photoshop. I don't need to pay somebody 10 grand to design my logo or whatever. I'm just playing around with this tool. And from what I've seen from the platform, I know this is still early days, I'm very confident that, should enough people learn about what you all are doing and get to really play with this sandbox, let alone them start to explore the creator economy components of it. Because for people, I don't play Roblox. I've never played in my life. I've never played Fortnite. I don't think people really understand how enormous those economies are from these games. Yes. And they're particularly wearable assets.
Yes.
And so when you really put all those pieces together, I was like, man, more people need to know about what you all are doing, because to me, I think one of the ways we really get to this adoption or just people even knowing this stuff is around is to really understand the tools, the actual tools and platforms that are being developed right now that will allow them a different way to come into this market, because most people are not about to drop $100,000 on a fucking ape. Excuse my French. Most people are not going to drop $5 grand, $2,000, $1,000 on any of these PFP collections. But they could come on, start to play with a tool like this and realize they enjoy the creation process. But the hurdles that come with Blender or some of these other tools have just been too much for them to really play with it and really see they have a knack for it. And that could be the beginning of a very fruitful career or a passion or a business. And that is bigger than NFTs. That's bigger than Web3. And you all are making a tool that is doing that for the 3D asset realm, which is going to, in my opinion, go parabolic in its significance over the next decade or two, just because of how metaverse-centric things are becoming. And the technology on the back end is making this where people can run very complex applications on a mobile device that you would have needed a supercomputer to do maybe even 5 or 10 years ago.
Yes.
And it's a wild time we're in.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that. I mean, you're hyping us up here, which I obviously appreciate. But I mean, really for us, I think you touched on many different things there. I think to sort of back up to your first comment around how we're approaching involving the creator. Well, really, with this, as you mentioned, anytime somebody drops a collection on OpenSea, you can go and see the rarity value associated to each item. So, obviously there's going to be a certain percentage of people that are trying to focus on that because they're, looking to flip that. More rarity equals, higher value. So for us, we really wanted to just approach this in a completely different way. So our approach was, can we, hide the rarity value or not even determine the rarity value until the entire collection is sold? So that's actually how REMX works, is we don't know the rarity value of an asset until the entire collection is sold out, and only then is rarity determined and displayed. So again, it's a very different process. It's more sort of, coming in from a creative lens and saying, I'm going to look for the one that I really want, that really speaks to me and appeals to me, just like you do a piece of art. When you're out looking for art to hang on your walls. It's not for some people, it's about how rare this piece is, but for many people, it's about the aesthetic. Does this speak to me? Is this something that I want to own? Is this something that I want to hang on my walls? And we approach REMX in the same way, in that we let people come in, we let people curate, press that REMX button as many times as you like, zero cost to do that. And then when you find the one that really speaks to you, you mint that one, you own that one, and you just might find out later on that there are some rare elements tied to that make that even more valuable. So again, we just really approach this in a different way. So that's our everything we do. We want to be different. We want to involve everybody in the creation process. We want to be as accessible as possible, allow anybody to jump in, create, purchase. We don't want to price people out. So we're working with our creators on price points that are reasonable, that make sense, that don't box buyers out here. Of course, there may be collections that grow in value, based on the creator behind it, but that's really our general approach to everything we're doing here.
Yeah, I love that. I think, especially when I first got in, because it took me a long time to spend some money on an NFT, man. I was just like, I'll spend money on this altcoin. I've done my fundamental research on this, and I see it. But obviously, we're in the bull market, find the right ones in the bear market. But it took me a long time to purchase an NFT. And funny story, obviously no one knew it was going to shake out the way it did. One of my first ones, it wasn't the first. First one was a project from Monster Cat that launched on the Nifty Gateway.
Okay.
And this was like January or February of 2021. And then I think the second one, this was like my first, what I felt like expensive one, was a Jungle Freak. And I remember, see how they all going. I remember literally they were the same price. I was looking at a Jungle Freak or a Doodle because they launched like damn near the same week or two.
Okay.
And I was just like, something about the energy around these. The Jungle Freaks obviously was closer to like the ape kind of meta at the time. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. I would have bought that damn Doodle, but I was factoring in a balance of what do I think looks dope, but also this is an investment to me because I don't plan on hanging this anywhere. Where are those rare traits? And it's cool when there's a overlap between one that calls you from an aesthetic standpoint, but also has some rare value and or traits and you think it's a value price at that time or close to the floor maybe. But oftentimes some of the stuff that's the most rare or available may not speak to you, and then it kind of skews or it might push people away who effectively what you all have created allows both people to be satisfied. Those who want to look for rare traits, and then those who don't want to avoid something that they like because they're thinking in the back of their head somewhere, even if they're not a flipper, damn, this trait's not rare, it's super common, so, this might be a floor one down the road. And I think as a whole, being in the wearable segment pushes you further away from that energy because so many collections, it is about that PFP or that kind of grail within that collection itself versus saying, hey, let's take more of this approach like 10 KTF or FTK, I forget whatever it is doing and saying, all right, these are pieces that can augment whatever it is you're doing. And then when you go back to the interoperability play and saying, all right, yeah, you bought this, MeBit or you bought whatever else this avatar is that you can now have inside of this environment, but what can you do to customize that even further? And that's the wave that I don't think has hit yet. And at some point, there will be some bull market where that probably is the wave of saying, all right, these are the items that really allow us to build on these PFPs that we spent six figures on, a few years ago.
Exactly. And that's our mindset. Really, we're very, and again, I know this is this term's thrown around a lot, but we're very focused on utility. We really are. We believe that digital wearables provide real utility for collectors. We also, I think part of the challenge with these PFP projects is that you get all these traits that are associated with it, and then it almost doesn't make sense to sort of upgrade or evolve that piece, right? It doesn't make sense. However, we believe in more sort of personalization around avatars. And I don't want to speak about it too much right now. We are secretly working on an avatar skin project that we hope to introduce into the platform in the future soon. But the idea of actually being able to leverage these wearable assets on avatars and being able to remix outfits, buy and sell different wearables, so that it's not about buying one asset. It's only ever going to be your asset. It can never change or evolve. We believe in flexibility and personalization around these pieces, but all of those separate elements, being NFTs and being owned, and the idea of that whole collection and avatar becoming more valuable. And if eventually you do decide to resell it, well, it's not just about the avatar. It's not just about the PFP. It's about everything that comes along with that you've collected along the way. That becomes much more value. But I think about it like, the idea of building up, let's say Fortnite or Call of Duty, you build up your account. And that account becomes more valuable the more that you build, and then people go out and then resell that account. You don't just sell the there's no way to sell the skin or the avatar. But you touched on something earlier that got me really excited. So I have kids, as I mentioned. They play Fortnite, they play Roblox. We spent way too much money on both those platforms. But like you said, I think people don't really recognize the value of these economies, and I feel like part of these economies really center around the skins or the avatars and the upgrades around those. And that's really our mindset here as well is, when it comes to the metaverse, the sheer power of personalization, customization around skins and wearables. That's really where we believe the future is. And huge economies will be built around these avatar projects, in my opinion.
I think it's absolute fact. And the crazy thing is there have been moments where I have had such deep conflict that I work in this space because I don't want my son to grow up in a world where everybody's living in a fucking headset.
Right.
At the same time, though, one cannot ignore what is happening around them. All you can do is learn about it, see how it can be used as a tool, where the benefits are, and then try to influence it in a way that is net positive, right? And I just say that to say anybody who does not truly understand how huge all of this wearable digital avatar metaverse stuff is going to be. Yeah, I mean, you still got some time to figure it out, but it is going in that direction unequivocally in my mind. Now, one last thought I just want to throw out, and there's definitely, some individual interest in this as I'm invested in these collections, but I look at how so many people have spoken about the thesis that gaming, in particular, GameFi, play to earn, play and earn, whatever, is going to be what ultimately brings, hundreds of millions, billions of people into this ecosystem, because tokens themselves are still very much like analyzing stocks in a lot of ways, and a lot of people aren't into that, or speculative investments, this, and the third. But when you literally just say, hey, this is a thing you can go have fun with in this game. So I'm curious if you all have, if you, and this is Mike, not Remix, but if you are familiar at all with a project called My Pet Hooligan.
I'm familiar with it, yes.
Okay. So I think about, and I hold one of those NFTs. That was one of the ones I was like, I think this is a good long-term bet. It's very underappreciated. They're actually working on something called Interloop. And basically, are you familiar with it?
No.
So you can almost think of it as what an interoperable tech stack infrastructure for people to come in and build their own worlds within this greater system that already exists. And so the game, My Pet Hooligan, I think it's called the Hooliverse. I don't know the name of it, but that's let's call it a room within a greater house. And that house is Interloop. And the way they're designing it is, so let's say, Doge Pound Collection or Bored Ape Yacht Club or some other collection wants to have a game, they can take their assets, convert them the way they need to be compatible within Interloop, and then they just plug these assets in to a game infrastructure that's already built, because it runs on Unreal Engine, and they have a partnership with Epic Games for the server supporting a lot of these other things. But one of the things they're doing, and they literally already have an alpha out right now that you can play, they have environments you can go within, like shops and stores and discos in this game, and they have already stated that they have full intentions to allow people to sell merchandise within this environment in this game. And so then I think about, once again, tools like Remix and that being a very different experience compared to how people have done it up to this point, where they kind of go on a menu, you see it laid out, and you choose the one you want, versus being in the game, seeing the assets and shopping for it, and then that transaction happening inside of that environment. And once again, this just being a tool that can allow somebody a much lower barrier to entry to explore that as a creative outlet or a business opportunity, because there are going to be so many businesses that spin up that center around these kind of focal points as the gathering spot. And that's just one project in a sea of tens of thousands. And there's only going to be, iteration built on top of what people are doing today. And I just think, this is a really powerful tool.
Well, first of all, I love that. I need to look into it in more detail. It sounds very exciting. Obviously a lot to unpack there. But really, my view of what the metaverse will be is this exactly. It's how can you bring in whatever digital identity you've chosen into one central ecosystem, and build sort of social dynamics around that with other friends that have chosen a different form of digital identity. To me, that is the metaverse. And then so that sort of the ecosystem and commerce around that, I believe, will be a big piece of the metaverse as well. It's really sort of, how can we sort of mimic real world in a digital environment. And to me, that it is exactly that. You as an individual, whatever digital identity you've chosen in the metaverse, should be able to communicate with others, friends, make new friends, shop, buy new clothing, play games, all of this, really that is sort of my vision of what the metaverse means and what it should be. So tools like this, I think, are absolutely important. And I think that, what I love to see is people thinking in this way, building tools for others to be able to, bring other IP, bring other projects in. To me, will be the players who have a lot more longevity in this space. That's what I believe.
Well said. This has been awesome. This has been a really fun time and insightful, and I really appreciate you making the time for it. Before we get out of here, any closing thoughts, and then let the people know where they can find you and where they can get involved with REMX.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you having me. This has been a lot of fun. I could probably talk for another 2 hours about this stuff, but I guess we'll have to cut it off at some point. If you're interested in learning more about REMX, we are at remix.xyz. If you want to test out our prototype, remix.xyz/create. Anybody can jump in there, grab a pair of sneakers or a jacket and upload their own content and start remixing to get an idea of what REMX is all about. Behind the scenes, we're doing a lot more. So this is just a sort of just scratching the surface of what we're building with the prototype. But behind the scenes, we're building a lot more complex content and easy ways to access these tools. So would love everybody to check that out. You can reach me at Mike at remix.xyz if you want to reach out. Would love to chat with anybody who's interested in leveraging the platform to create.
Love it. Well, once again, this has been Mike Montgomery, Director of Product at REMX, and I super appreciate this, man. We'll talk real soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Peace.
You niggas ain't cheat me. You reenacted TV. I'm a real life shot caller. You niggas just shoot at the breeze. I can shoot at your knees. 1 cap, 2 cap, my cat. Go black. Producing near load of facts. Catch a skeleton around the map. See, I terrorize like it's getting more. Cause I theorize at higher tempo. But you been on in my modo.